Christ Jesus. I go to the rock. I run to the rock, Christ Jesus. I go to the rock. Because he is my shelter. I go to the rock. He's my shelter in the time of need. I go to the rock. Even in the times of tribulation. Yes, I go to the rock. Lord, tell me where do you? Yes, I go to the rock. In the times of trouble. Yes, I go to the rock. Tell me where do you go? I go to the rock. When I need someone to lean on. I go to the rock. Even when I need someone to lean. I go to the rock. When I need someone to lean. I go to the rock. When I need someone to lean. I go to the rock. And when the earth all around me is sinking sand, on Christ the solid rock I stand. When I need a shelter, when I need a friend, I go to the rock. I go to the rock.
Good morning, Greenville Avenue Saints. So good to know and see some of you that are here, and good to know others of you are streaming in. We are certainly blessed with a beautiful day that the Lord has given to us. And this weekend, this reboot weekend, has been wonderful. I know we've been able to participate in some activities. And this morning we have another great activity that we're going to participate in as we look at this theme of Ready, Set, Grow. We have a workshop that is called the No Debt, No Sweat workshop, and it's by Brother Steve Diggs from the Antioch congregation in Tennessee. And we're so happy to have him back with us. He came to us a number of years ago and gave this workshop. It has been helpful to my mindset as it relates to eliminating debt and being fiscally responsible and good stewards of what God has given us. And so we have decided to bring him back again in this Ready, Set, Grow quarter, to have him to bring that same workshop to us. And I want to encourage you, if your children and to get your whole family to participate in this, because this is something I believe that the family can benefit from, that our kids, maybe they don't understand everything about money, but they can begin to grasp what it means to take care of your finances. And so without any further delay, we want to bring to you our brother in Christ, Brother Steve Diggs. God bless you.
Thank you so much, John. I am so happy to see the big, huge crowd here. Really not. There's just a few of us together, but I know something. I know that there are a bunch of you out here watching us, and that will probably stream and watch this later on as well. So welcome. And by the way, I bring everybody here greetings from the land of grits and guitars. I live in Nashville. Bonnie and I had a long night of flights and a lot of comings and goings, but we're finally here this morning, and I'm glad to see everybody. You might have heard about the old guy. He was not a very happy father. His kid had ended up in jail, and he was really bummed out. So he writes his son in jail. He says, "Dear son, I am so sad. You're in jail, and I'm an old man. This is the time of year when you and I used to plant the tomatoes together, but we can't do it. I'm so sad. Love, Dad." Well, a couple days later, Dad gets a letter back from his kid in jail. "Dear Dad, don't dig up the garden. That's where I buried all the bodies." Well, sure enough, the FBI gets the letter. They come, they swarm the old guy's house, dig up everything, can't find a thing, peck on his door, apologize, and leave. A couple of days later, Dad gets another letter from his kid in jail. Dear Dad, sorry I couldn't be there to help. I hope you enjoyed the garden. It was the best I could do in a hurry. Well, John tells me I have 50 minutes to do this first session, so I'm going to be running at about 600 or 800 words per minute with gust up to about 1,000 to get into all of this. But I want to talk with you a little bit this morning about something that is so germane, so foundational to our lives. By the way, did you know that Jesus spoke about money and materialism more than any other one topic? One person has estimated that at least 1 out of every 7 comments that Christ made had to do with something about money and materialism. It is a big, wide, broad, deep issue. Now, I've got a couple of things I need to get out of the way before we get going here. And the first one, of course, is, and I suppose you can see the monitor. I don't really know how this thing's shaking out. I don't know if I'm real big on the screen with a little monitor, or if they're the same size, or if I'm a little postage stamp and the monitor's big. I don't care. But at any rate, we're going to be looking at this monitor. If you've got your little books already at home, open those suckers up right now, because we're going to be getting into those. But I need to explain a couple of things first. Number one, these days my forgetter works a lot better than my rememberer does. I'm going to be sharing with you a few stories to make broader points that go back quite a number of years. And the truth is, I don't remember all the details. So there may be moments where I'm going to have to kind of make up some details in order to share the story, in order to make the bigger point. So I hope that that'll be okay. The second thing I want to communicate is this. Everything that I'm teaching in here is, in my judgment, important material. And I stand on the shoulders of a lot of other teachers. A lot of this material is my own. A lot of it is inspired and learned from other folks. But the thing that makes the No Debt, No Sweat seminar different than any other seminar is that our seminar is squarely placed on top of the Bible. Our Bible is our leader in all of this. We're going to lean into Scriptures. We're going to learn from God's Word. We're going to do things God's way as we go forward. So in your workbooks, if you'll open up to that first opening that says, second opening actually, the one that says the plan on the top of the left page there, that's where we're going to get down to business. I have a 2-step plan I want to share with you that everything in our whole presentation is going to be foundational on. First thing is simply this. We need to realize as we begin to deal with our money that things are frequently not the way they appear to be. They just are not as they appear. You might have heard about the old guy, comes into the movie theater, sits down, and starts to watch the show. And about 2 minutes into this thing, he notices that seated in front of him is another guy. And sitting next to this other guy is the biggest, the ugliest, the hairiest dog he's ever seen in his life. And he starts to watch the dog. And the dog is watching the movie. And every time something funny happens, the dog yelps out. Something sad happens, the dog kind of whines. When the bad guy gets the best of the good guy, the dog growls at the screen. Well, finally, this first fellow cannot take it any longer. He leans forward, taps the other guy on the shoulder and says, "Listen, I hate to bother you in the middle of the show like this, but I can't get over the way your dog seems to be enjoying the movie." Other guy looks back at him and says, "I can't either. He hated the book." Things are not the way they appear to be. And here's the hard, cold fact. Many of us this morning are not the way we look or the way we pretend to be. We've got a group of well-dressed individuals here. Everybody's got their hair combed, and those of you that still have some hair, I'm struggling. I'm follically challenged these days myself. But we've got our hair combed, and we're wearing matching socks and all that good stuff. And at home, you may not be as dressed up, but we put on a good show for people. And there's not anything wrong with that. But the truth is, some 75% of all Christians, 75% of all Christians, and more than that, people within our culture are struggling with money. We look one way, but in truth, in many cases, we're not that way. So a big part of what we're going to be doing here in the No Debt, No Sweat event is we're going to be talking about how to take some of these masks off and become more real people and begin to lean into each other. I'm just going to tell you, the people that are sitting in this room right here and those of you at home are the best buddies any of us are ever going to have in this world. And we've got to learn to love on other folk, trust other folk, get open with other folk, and begin to discuss our issues. James talked about this, confess your sins one to another, pray for each other. Why? Because the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man does a lot. I'm going to talk about that passage later, but that is foundational to all this. Here's the second concept that I want to build everything in this presentation on, and that is that things may not be as they seem, but more than that, there's always going to be only one best way to do anything. Now, there may be 5 or 10 or 50 different ways to accomplish a goal, but there always remains one best way to do it. And successful people are those rare individuals who find that best way to do something, and they simply replicate the project over and over and over and over again. And here's the good news. You don't have to be real smart to be real successful. What you have to do is find that best way to keep doing things over and over again. You might have heard about a little guy named Jess. Jess had not been the sharpest knife in the drawer back in high school, but here he is 3 years after graduation. He's come back to his old hometown, to the high school reunion, and everybody in town's talking about Jess, because Jess is like the richest kid that's ever come out of this little town. He's like a quadrillionaire. And nobody can figure this out because he was not that smart of a kid. So one of the guys finally comes up to him and says, Jess, we just have to ask you a question, dude. How in this world did you ever get so rich? Jess thinks about it for a minute and says, well, I guess I don't know exactly. You see, I go down here to China and I buy those whatchamabobs for $2 each. And then I bring my whatchamabobs back over here to the United States, the ones I paid $2 for, and I'm selling them here in the United States of America for $7. And he said, I can't figure this thing out either, but somehow I'm getting by just fine on my little 5% markup. You don't have to be real smart to be real successful. What you have to do is find the best way to do something and keep on doing it. No Debt, No Sweat is going to be all about best practices. How can we best handle God's money God's way? And that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, this whole thing brings me back a few years, back to the year 1976. 1976 was a pretty good year in America. A lot of good things were going on in those years. But 1976 was also the year that Bonnie and I got married. And I'm telling you, when Bonnie and I got married, we had plenty of debt. I mean, not any more than most of our friends, but we had the house, we had the cars, we had the furniture, the appliances, and it was just too much. Well, going into the 1980s, I began to realize some things. I began to realize that the Bible had a lot to say about money. I'd never paid much attention to it before. But did you know that our Bible has over 2,000 passages in it that talk about money and materialism? It's everywhere. And through the 1980s, Bonnie and I determined to change our way of doing stuff. And we decided that we were going to get out of debt with God's help. And thankfully, and I'm not bragging about this, by the end of the 1980s, Bonnie and I had stepped completely out of debt. We'd even paid off her school bills. We'd paid off the car. I mean, my car drives better, I've noticed, when I don't have debt on it. And going into 1990, we finally paid off our house. And life has been so much better. Well, in the 1990s, I noticed that folks were starting to kind of come to me along, talking. A lot of these were Christian people about their money troubles. And that was when I was beginning to be aware of the fact that money is the great secret sin in the church. We talk about divorce, we talk about remarriage, we talk about internet pornography, we talk about everything. But nobody wants to stand up and say, you know something? I'm sitting bolt right up in bed at 3 a.m, scared about my money, worried about paying my bills, and fighting with my spouse all the time. I'm tired of this stuff. Well, in 2000, I sold my companies in Nashville. I had a broadcast production company and a marketing company and all. We sold those. And I wrote another book. I'd written a few books before, but I wrote another book called No Debt, No Sweat. And didn't really expect, that much from it. But, I thought, well, if anybody wants me to come and speak to them, I'll be happy to. And I thought, well, I might come out and visit folks 6 or 8 times a year. Well, God has been very good to this ministry. And I would have to go back and look at it. But to date, I think we've done the No Debt seminar some 600 plus times. And it's not because of this messenger, it's because this message is so desperately needed by so many people that we've got to begin to open up on this. Back in 1976, Bonnie and I learned some things, and we started changing our hearts. And we began to realize that if we do it correctly, failure in truth can be the first step to true, lasting success. Failure can be one of the best things that can happen to us, because if we use it correctly, we can use it to boomerang us around with greater speed than we've ever had before, and with a toolkit that we've never had before, skill sets that we've never had before, to get us from where we are to where we want to be on a permanent basis. I'm going to illustrate it this way. Let's go way back, mid-century, 1950s. 1950s, pretty good years in America. We'd won the war, the baby boom had begun. America was feeling her collective oats, pretty good economy, all that going on. Well, 1957, 1958, those were interesting years too. Those were the years when the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants both grand slammed their way out here to the West Coast. 57, 58, those are the years when Billboard magazine started racking up hits with the Shirelles and with Elvis Presley and Pat Boone and the likes. 1957, 58, those were the years when Danny Thomas' Tales of Wells Fargo and Gunsmoke were all capturing our tele-attention in the evenings. These were pretty good years, but not for everybody. 1957 was the year that the Ford Motor Company decided they were going to introduce a brand new car. And boy, was that an event. Does anybody have any guess what car I'm talking about? That's right. It was the Edsel. 1957, Ford Company brought this to America. Believe it or not. They thought it was pretty. Well, anyways, that car did not pan out. They thought it was going to be the niche filler for an entire generation. I mean, everything about this new Edsel was cool. There was like a push-button transmission control in the center of the steering column. Mr. Ford made a film where he said, "I'm proud to tell you that the Edsel is here to stay." Rosemary Clooney, Louis Armstrong, Frank Sinatra, they were, and listen, if you're not 200 years old, ask somebody like Ben in here, you know, he can tell you who these people are. Seriously, I mean, all the big stars were on television singing about this great car. But do you know what happened? Nothing happened. Sales flatlined. One person described the Edsel sales chart as looking like a dangerous downhill ski slope. Kept getting worse every month. Now, why the Edsel didn't sell? I don't have a clue. People still debate this. Some people say, well, the Edsel cost too much. Other people say, no, it was too big. Other people say, no, the reason the Edsel didn't sell was because the Edsel didn't work. Hoods didn't close, trunks didn't open. That fancy transmission, that thing never lived up to its mission. Well, I don't know what happened to the Edsel, but I do know that after 3 horrible years at the Ford Company, they finally shut down production on the Edsel. Now, you may be thinking, well, Steve-O, what in the world does this have to do with me? Well, maybe it does have anything to do with you. You may be part of the 20 or 30% right here, right now, who are doing very well. But stay with me. We're going to be talking about how to prepare for a dignified retirement, how to be a more godly giver, what to teach our kids and grandkids about money, all that. But on the other side, you may be part of the 70+% of us who can identify with Ford. I mean, here you are, just kind of like Ford was back in 1960, sort of in the middle of your own pity puddle. And you can stay there if you want to. And Ford could have stayed there if they'd wanted to and watched the entire company tick down. But fortunately, Ford did something different. They came over here, they developed the strategies, the skills, the disciplines, the resiliency that they needed to get out of that mess. And arguably, for the next 40 years, Ford was the most successful maker of cars in the history of the world up until that point. See, we can do things the way Ford did if we choose to. But right now, we're struggling. I mean, maybe you can identify with some of these things. I know that I can. You know what it feels like to sit bolt upright in bed in the middle of the night, scared about paying your bills. You are afraid to answer the phone half the time because you're scared there's going to be a collector calling. You've ordered another card because all the cards we have right now are maxed out. I run into Christian people routinely that have 8, 10, 12 credit cards, and most of which are maxed out all the time. You're afraid to talk to your spouse about money because, boom, every time you do it, it ends in a fight. Number 1 cause of divorce in America, according to Gallop research, is money struggles. Even at church or at a school or at a ball game or any place else you go to, you find your mind drifting back to the things that you're so worried about with the money. And maybe the saddest one of all is this bottom one. Even when a good cause comes along here at church and you desperately want to give, your heart breaks because you just don't really have anything left to give. If you can identify with any of these things, what we need to do is just remember that Ford turned the Edsel mess around, and we can do the same thing here. But to do this, we have to remember something else. We folks are all like fish in a barrel. Everybody, and I do mean everybody out there, you know, has their hands out for our money. I don't care whether we're talking about the telemarketers, the retailers, the real estate people. And by the way, I love real estate people. I'm not picking on you. But you know that if you get in the house before anybody else gets in, you know, and pop some cinnamon buns in the oven, you're going to be able to sell that house faster. Everybody wants our money. And what we have to understand is that we're not going to give our money to other people unless there's a good reason to do it. You see, America has a closet sin. You can call it materialism, you can call it consumerism. Personally, I like to call it stuffaholism. It's that attitude of ingratitude that says, hey, L'Oreal is right, and I am worth it. Well, I'm not sure that we are worth everything we tell ourselves that we're worth. You see, God knows how we tick. And there are two unmistakable, undeniable truths that we really need to kind of get our arms around. Truth number one, as long as Steve Diggs denies or excuses any sin in my life, I'm going to constantly be falling farther and farther and farther behind. Truth number two, there is really strength in numbers. And Christians, listen carefully to what I'm about to say here, please. If we let this seminar come and go here at Greenville Avenue today and tomorrow, and that's the end of that, the benefits are going to be limited. But if we begin that conversation, some of you ladies get together and talk about it, some of you men, some husbands and wives might want to have another couple over, and just start, bring it up. Say, listen, I am in a mess with my money. How about you? You might be stunned at how this opens up relationship, conversation, and some real true healing. The church may choose to offer some kind of a follow-up program to this. If they do, then get into it. Take that class, take that study, go deeper with that. Here's my point. People that are struggling with money problems are frequently in a state of denial. And I ain't talking about the river in Egypt. I'm talking about a broken, dysfunctional lifestyle. It's destroying our spiritual vigor. Did you know that the average Christian gives less than 5% of his income to God? Actually, the numbers are probably, depending on the survey, probably closer to 2 or 3%. So get the picture. Here we are giving God 2 or 3% of our money, but we're paying on our short-term debt, like credit cards, car loans, we're paying about 20% of our money on average. So now we've got this conundrum where MasterCard is getting 20% of our money, and MasterCard is getting 20% of our money, and the master of the universe is getting like 3 or 4% of our money. That's not where we should be as Christians, but we're in that very mess. The devil knows all this stuff and he loves it. These upcoming facts are not happy, clappy facts, but they're true. Today in America, we have debt of at least $29 trillion, and what's going on in Washington right now is making that so much worse by the second we can't even comprehend it. We are putting so much debt burden on our children and their children. It's going to be almost impossible for them to ever dig out. And by the way, this number right here is a paltry number compared to what the real number is. This does not include the unfunded mandates, which bring this up to about $120 or $30 trillion. If you can comprehend that, I don't know any human that can. But it's so much money we can't even think about it. It's the world's wealth. Typical retiree today has about a fourth of the money in their 401k that they need to have to maintain their ongoing style of living. The average college student has about $56,000 in debt right this minute. Average 20-something is running about $45,000 of debt. The average credit card balance in America right now has come down a little bit. I think this number may be a tad old because it's now going back up. The average credit card debt in America is at least $7,000 per household among households that have credit cards. And here's something. There was a survey done showing that, get this is hard for me to get this, fully 27% of all Americans are convinced that the best shot they have of ever becoming a millionaire is to win the lottery. Now, I'm just going to tell you what I believe about this. You don't have to agree with me. I will not stand up here and tell you that playing a lottery ticket is a mortal sin, but it is as stupid as it can be. I'm just telling you, your odds of winning a major payout in a lottery are way less than 1 in 8 million. Shoot, there's a better chance that a flea will go in your right ear and come out your left eyeball singing Dixie than there is that you're going to win a big payout in a lottery. But people do this all the time, and people lose their money. The average person who buys one lottery ticket in the course of that same year will buy more than $400 of lottery tickets. And if we would take that same $400 and do what I'm going to show you how to do tomorrow night with your planning and your saving, that person could very likely, starting as a very young adult, that person could probably retire with most of $1 million if they invested that $400 plus a year correctly. That is the fact, that is the truth, that is the status. Now again, I've dumped a lot of very tough things out, I know that. When I have a problem, I want a solution. So I'm going to share a solution, and it comes from a hero of mine, Vince Lombardi. Does anybody recognize this man right here? Yeah, when this guy was finally assuming room temperature, when he passed away in 1973, I think it was in January, he was the winningest coach that the NFL had ever produced up to that point. 2 NFL Super Bowl wins, 5 NFL championships. This guy knew football. Story goes, at the beginning of practice every season, Lombardi would walk over here and pull out of the duffel bag and pull out a football and get in front of his guys and say, fellows, now remember, these are all hardened football players. Fellows, the item that I'm holding in my hand right here, right now, is a football. And that's where he began practice every season, because he wanted his guys to understand that he did not care if they knew all the nuances of the game, if they knew all the plays in their own books, or even the plays in the other team's books. He didn't care about that first, because he first wanted them to understand the fundamentals, the basics of football. And that's where he started every season. And that's where we need to start, I think, with our money. It's the same with our money. I want to share with you 4 quick fundamentals, and these are important. And please be filling out your books as you see these underlined words, because they coincide with words in your book. And when this whole thing is done, you'll be able to go home with a good packet of material. Number 1, you've got to remember, if you're struggling with money, that you're not alone. That's one of the great lies from the devil. He makes you feel like you're on an island by yourself. Intellectually, you know that other people are struggling, but you just feel so alone, you're embarrassed, and you don't know what to do about it. Again, this is why I'm saying, Christians, start talking to Christians. Be the men and women that God calls us to be. We have to do this, and this is where we open up and we shine that light on that roach in the room. You know, when you go into a dark room and you open up the door, you might see some roaches on the floor. The minute you get a flashlight or flip on the light, what happens to those roaches? They're out of there, right? The devil's a roach. When we start to shine the light of Jesus and the fellowship of his people on that roach, he is old news. And I'm telling you, this is the way we have to deal with these things. Number 2, there's some productive steps that you can take right here, right now to get out of this mess. Number 3, I've got to be truthful here. You didn't get in the mess overnight. You ain't going to fix it overnight either. February 1992, I was 39 years old. I found myself being taken to the hospital. And before they let go of me, they had done, count them, 5 heart bypasses on me. I was one scared 39-year-old. Now, again, it wasn't like I hadn't earned the right. I mean, I looked like a walking refrigerator. And I was working like 90, 100 hours a week. And eating anything that got on my plate that didn't get off first. I mean, I did everything wrong. But here I am, I've got the surgery. And after the surgery's over, I come back home and I'm healing. And about a month or so after I'd gotten over this, or past the surgery, I wasn't over it, I decided, Steve, you need to get into shape. So one day, I kind of pulled on my gym clothes and my running shoes, what I had of them back then, and I snuck out the door because I knew Bonnie didn't want to see this. So I snuck out the door and I started running around doing all kinds of stupid stuff I should not have been doing at that point. And then I come inside, I'm still jumping around doing all this stuff. And suddenly I'm in the kitchen and I look up to the ceiling, and guess what? The ceiling started going around and round in circles. Man, I went down like a rock. And I'm telling you, Bonnie, bless her heart, she was there. She slid a chair underneath me, got me to the hospital. We got through that mess. But I learned something from that one. I learned that I wasn't going to fix 39 years of bad behavior in 39 days. I had to have a plan. I had to work my plan. Thankfully, God has been so good to me. I mean, I go to the gym. I do the equivalent of about a 4 or 5 mile run routinely. I feel great. I just feel wonderful. But we have got to have a plan. We've got to stick to that plan. And number 4, I don't make many promises on this side of heaven, but I'll make this one. By getting back to basics, we can enjoy a far more successful future than some of us have ever even thought was possible. So, one of the things I want to touch on, and this first session is just sort of our get acquainted session. Tonight is the epicenter of everything, the ABCs of godly money management. Do not miss this evening's get together at 5 o'clock, because This evening, we're going to talk about the A of learning to acknowledge who owns it all. The B, I'm going to show you how to develop a family budget. We call these personal financial freedom plans that will rock your life forever. And the C is how to control our money, how to build what I call a wolf barrier, 10-stone wall, to keep the wolf away from my front door. How do we get out of debt completely? How do we pay off the car? How do we get ready for college? How do we get ready for a dignified retirement? There are 10 steps. And when we get through those, the wolf will never be back to your front door. But in this first session, I just want to hit on a couple of quick high points here. One of those things I want to mention to you is the question that Christians often ask other Christians. Is it sinful? Is it wrong to have debt? And I would tell you that to my knowledge, the Bible nowhere tells us that all debt is necessarily sinful. But the Proverbs does warn us about the dangers. Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower becomes the servant. And a better translation is the slave of the lender. And people say, I ain't nobody's slave. Well, you know, when we're being driven by the payment book, you can pretty much make the case. And I'm telling you, I don't want to be slave to anybody. I want to control my life and not have somebody telling me how I have to live my life to get them paid. I just don't want to live like that. So there are two things that I encourage people to think about before we borrow money. Number one, I need to say, Steve-O, what is your motive for borrowing this money? You see, a lot of our borrowing is done with bad motives. And leading off that is the fact that in many cases we simply do not trust God like we say we do. We don't trust Him to provide for us. Often there's also an element of greed involved. Jesus talked about this. He said, watch out, be on your guard against all forms of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his stuff, his possessions. This is Jesus talking to us. We've got to get priorities right. And another little item that has to do with our borrowing is our vanity. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I'll just simply put mine up. Many years ago, I'm talking about over 30 years ago, I can tell you there were numbers of times that I borrowed money, not so much as out of need as I did out of greed and out of vanity. I just wanted somebody else to think I was cool. I wanted to impress somebody at a stoplight that I didn't know with my car. I mean, seriously? But this was the kind of game that I played, and maybe some of you guys can identify with it. And it's sad. By the way, let me ask you a fast question. What do you think is the most expensive, the most costly thing you will ever get? Somebody tell me. A house? Median price on a home right now is not quite but it's pushing $200,000, about $180,000. But it's not your home. That's nationwide. Here it's much higher. I know that, but it's not your house. Somebody else. Kids? They say that a child that is born today is going to cost $249,000. I don't know how they got to that exact number. $249,000 to get them up to age 18. Then if you want to give them a college education, and by the way, tomorrow night I'm going to be talking about, or maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, one of these nights, I'm going to be talking about paying for college. And let me just tell you something, Mom and Daddy. I don't believe that just because you hatch one of them, you owe them a college education. Let's get clear about that one, okay? I'm just saying, and we're going to talk about that tonight. But the most costly thing any of us will ever have, it ain't the house, it ain't the college, it ain't the kids, nothing else. The most expensive thing we'll ever have is an out-of-control ego. Makes us do dumb things. Makes us spend money we don't have, to buy things we don't need, to impress people we don't know. Really? So we've got to kind of get our arms around this. Here's the second thing. After I've said, Steve, what are your motives for borrowing? Steve, what is your ability to repay? Now, for those of you in here who have a few miles on the odometer, this seems like a no-brainer. I mean, you borrow the stuff, you got to give it back. And that's about what I'm going to say here. The depressing thing about borrowed money is you got to give the stuff back. The trouble is we've got a bunch of people that have grown up in the last millennials and Zs, and I'm not too sure about those of us that are baby boomers and the Gen Xers actually. But there have been a bunch of us that have come along who honestly have this deep down inside feeling like, I can borrow this and who cares, I don't really have to buy it. You know, they don't think about the reality of having to pay it back. Today, when we borrow money, that's when today's instant gratification becomes tomorrow's bondage. And Christians, I'm telling you, I have never been to an Applebee's, to an Arby's, to a Red Lobster, any restaurant, anywhere that was worth it. Did you know that if you have a credit card bill right now, say with about $4,000 of junk debt on it, like restaurant bills and stuff like that, did you know that depending on your contract, more likely than not, if you're paying the minimum off, it can take you up to 20 to 30 years to get that sucker paid off? Did you know that? Folks, there's some of us sitting here right this minute who have made payments right this month on meals that we ate during the Clinton administration. Just saying. So, so presuming on the future, the point is simply this. Presuming on the future is so very, very dangerous. I mean, we buy this right now, we borrow the money, and we're thinking, I'll be able to make those payments, no big deal. But then, kaboom, real life happens. Murphy's Law kicks in. Everybody knows what Murphy's Law says, right? Something can go wrong, what? It's going to go wrong, yeah. That's when the washer and the dryer both break down and one of them floods the floor. Or the axle breaks in one car and the other one loses its transmission. We're back in the soup again. I'm going to talk to you tonight about how to deal with those kinds of issues too. Really, James talked about the same thing. He said, now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we're going to go to this or that city, we're going to spend a year there, carry on business, and we're going to make money. Well, you don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. What is your life? Your life is but a mist. Poof. Just a little mist. I'm off this. Let me get back to it. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, what you ought to say is, if it is the Lord's will, we will live or do this or that. But as it is, you boast, you brag. Listen carefully. All such boasting is what? Evil. That is what James, the brother of Jesus, says. And we have to pay attention to this kind of thing. You see, Christians, we're the very people on this planet, and really the only people on this planet who could be expected. Because remember, people that are not regenerated, people who have not come to Christ, don't have the same worldview we do, okay? They don't see these things the same way we do. We are the ones that should be the people that are on this planet pre-acting, so we don't spend our lives having to react to everything that comes down the pike. You know, the Bible tells us that our lives are short. You know that. The Bible says, that the days of man, and again, we know that this is just kind of poetic, but it says the days of man are 70 years, right? And anything past that is kind of like bonus time on the clock, right? Well, and I know, we know people who have died when they were 20, and we've known other people who have lived to be 105. But generally, over the history of mankind, 70 years is pretty average. One person broke those 7 decades up this way. He said that first decade, that is the decade of childhood spills, followed by the decade of school and drills, which is followed by the decade of thrills, to be followed by the decade of bills, to be followed by the decade of ills, which will then be followed by the decade of pills, to be followed by the decade of what? Wills. Our lives are short, and we owe it to our God to use those lives as correctly as we know how to. Here's the bottom line, and we're going to wrap this up. The bottom line is this. Brothers and sisters, and I love you with all my heart, and please understand, when I get up and I'm talking about all these things, I'm not talking at anyone. I am talking with us all together. I have come down the pike on this. I'm doing better with my money than I am with some other things in my life. And I can teach a little bit about it. But every one of us are fellow strugglers. And we just need to love each other across the goal line. That's what it comes down to. And by the way, let me get real racial for a minute here, since everything else in our culture is. We've got to remember something. There's one race. It's the human race. And we've got to tie that knot together and just get into that. Bottom line, God wants you to experience His freedom. I love this passage. Thank you, God, for this. Make sure that your character is free from the love of money. Be content with what you have. Why is that? For He Himself, Jesus Himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. That's a promise, Christians. We can lay down, put our head in our pillow at nighttime. I don't care what's going on. We can go to bed with that promise. He will never forsake you. He will never desert you, no matter what we're going through. That has brought a lot of peace to a lot of people, including the guy standing in front of you. Folks, it's all, as I see it, it's all about the ladder. When I was just a little guy growing up, I was kind of indoctrinated. I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, and in those days, everybody was talking about success. I kind of grew up being taught, and my parents didn't teach me this, it was the culture, that, the way to succeed was kind of crawl, go up the ladder, right? And it was my fault more than anyone else's, but I sort of construed that to mean you go up that ladder, and if you have to step on people, you do what you have to get where you need to go. Now, I would never have said it or even thought it that bluntly. I'm speaking it more bluntly than I ever did it. But I had sort of that tinge of an attitude. Well, some years ago, decades ago, it started to dawn on me that isn't Christian. That's not the attitude that we need to have. So I kind of rejected that. Well, more recently, I've kind of gone back to believing that we need to be climbing the ladder. I just see it a little bit differently now. I think everybody in this room and everybody that's watching us from home this morning needs to be busily climbing your individual ladder of success. I'm just going to stand here and say that. I believe that, but it's how we define success that matters. Now, I don't know what it's going to be like the day I finally get to the top of my ladder. I mean, is that going to be the day that Bonnie and I get a phone call and we learn that one of the kids or grandchildren have been in a bad accident? Or is that going to be the day that I'm going to learn that Bonnie has just been in an accident herself or something's happened? Or would that be the day that one of these things that comes and goes in my left chest kind of comes and this time it doesn't go away? I don't know. But here's what I know for sure. The day that I finally get to the top of my ladder, Christians, is not going to be the day that I'm going to want to find out that for all these years, my ladder has been leaning against the wrong building. You know what I'm saying? It's a matter of focus. It's a matter of understanding what's really important. And I do not want to die and go to my grave and people say, hey, he was the money guy. He always talked to people about money. I hope you're hearing it, that it's a lot more than that. What I'm talking about is our spiritual link to God. And in the context of our money, yeah. But our money is filthy lucre. It's not who we are. It shouldn't be who we are. And it is so easy to be greedy without even knowing it. And let me say this as clearly as I know how to. Some of the poorest people I know are some of the greediest people I know. I'm just telling you. And so there are plenty of wealthy people that are too. But we kind of have a thought that, well, this is a sin of the wealthy. And it can be. A lot of people get wealthy by doing things they shouldn't do. I'll agree with that. But still, it's a sin that we're all susceptible to. And we've got to learn to walk away from it. Now, let me just real quickly tell you what's coming up, kind of give you a little bit of info on what's on the hit parade here. This evening, as I've already said, we're going to come back at 5. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 o'clock. And I'm watching into the viewer right here. I can see in the camera. And I'm looking around at you. Any of those of you that are there that aren't here tonight, we're going to come over to your place tonight for pizza. Okay? So everybody come and be here that you can. Okay? But seriously, we're going to be back at 5 o'clock online and right here in person doing our second session, the ABCs of Godly Money Management. I've already told you a little bit about it. I'm not going to repeat it except to say this is the epicenter of the entire seminar. I think you're going to love it. We're going to have a bunch of laughs together, and we're going to fix a lot of problems together. Tomorrow night, we're going to come back. Brother John, what time will we start tomorrow night? At 7 bells, 7 o'clock tomorrow night, we're going to come back and finalize with our last 2 sessions. First session tomorrow night is the debt session. I'm going to give you a 7-step do-it-yourself credit repair kit. How to completely get out of debt going forward. And in most cases, in a period of 1 to 4 years, you're going to love this. Everything but the house. I'm going to show you how to buy cars and never pay another car bill in your life. We're going to talk about dealing with debt and getting it behind us. And then in the final session, that is my favorite. That's the one when we look to the future. It's the getting ahead session. And that's what I want to share with you, how to plan for a dignified retirement, how to do the right things, the reasonable things, to be as prepared as we possibly can. So that is the agenda starting tonight, again at 5 o'clock. I want to share with you, before we break huddle this morning, about 3 resources that we have available. And the reason that it's important is this. This afternoon at 3:30, I'm going to be back over here. Some of us are going to be here together. I'll be happy to sign the books. We're going to be available to, we've got plenty of books for anybody that would like to get some of these. Come over to the church building between 3:30 and 4:30, and I'll be signing books. I'll sign it even later than that. Then at 5 o'clock, we're going to do the session, and after the session, I'll be signing books again. Happy to do that. And my wife, Bonnie, she's the pretty one in this outfit. She'll be over there helping you get these books. But at any rate, let me just tell you what we have. There are 3 books. This first book is a book that, in my thinking, everybody needs. What you may or may not know about me is that I do a lot of no debt, no sweat seminars, but what I do mainly with churches is I come and do leadership seminars. I do a thing called the Leadership Seminar that I've done all over the world, literally for churches. I do a lot of leadership training because in my personal life, I am a leadership speaker. I speak to American Airlines and Walmart and McDonald's and companies like this all the time about leadership. So this is a book on leadership, and it's a great book. It's easy to read the 14 keys to becoming a stand-up leader. And believe you me, everybody everywhere falls into one of three categories. You're either a leader, you know you're a leader, and you have people following, or you're a leader, but you don't think of yourself as a leader. But people lean into you. They're always looking to you for advice. Or you're what I call a leader in waiting, and you're the person that needs to step up to the bar and begin to help and lead and mentor other people. This book will really help you. The other book that I wanted to show you is this green covered book, Get the Green Light. This is a great book, in my judgment too, because it's designed to help anybody that communicates with anybody. It too is a fun read, but this book right here, it's directed at salespeople, but more broadly, it's like I said, anybody that deals with customers, anybody that has personal relationships that they want to improve on, this book is a great help. And lastly, Stop Running on Empty. And this is the book that is a foundational book dealing with the 8 proven skills that every Christian needs to develop in their hearts and in their lives going forward. Everything from conflict resolution to time management to dealing with our money, the whole 9 yards. Anyways, normal prices on these books, this book is $26. These books are both $16.95, $17. What we're going to be doing here this afternoon, and we'll do it this morning for those of you that are here if you want, we're going to have all these books available. But if you want to get all 3 of them and have a full library, you can do that. Or you can mix and match. You can get 3 of one or 2 of one and 1 of the other. It doesn't matter. But as long as you select 3 books, you can take these 3 books home for $30. That is like half price. I mean, that is a bargain. So at any rate, we'll have them available as long as we have some available. So come this afternoon at 3:30. Let's get some books to you. And then if you can, stick around. And if not, go back home. We'll watch this thing together and we'll have fun together. Let's have a word of prayer. Father God, thank you so much for bringing us together this morning. Please put your hand of blessing on this sweet church. It's in Jesus we pray and praise you, Father. Amen. God bless you.
So thankful to Brother Diggs and for the presentation. And we're going to start transitioning. If you didn't get this book, which he has been using, you need to make sure you come by the building at 3:30 to get this book so you can follow along during the entire workshop. So please bear with us as we make the transition into worship. It might be a little later than we usually are, but please, we'll be here just as soon as we can. All right. I know you heard that. You might not have seen me, but you heard that. All right.